Hey everyone, we'll wait for some more people to come in. If you can hear me, go ahead and comment in the questions channel that you can hear me, and I'll have Ben over here give me the thumbs up. We'll go from there. It's really dark in here, but I'm not going to talk for very long. We'll be screen sharing before we know it. Not seeing any viewers yet, so we'll give it just a minute. All right, now it looks like I see some people trickling in. When you hear me, comment in the questions channel on Slack. And we've been getting a lot of questions about, oh man, my lighting is really bad. I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and screen share right now because it's that bad. So yeah, we've been getting a lot of questions about Lambda University and when those decisions are going out. We're not making decisions yet. We will be sending out our admissions challenge later on tonight. It might come out really late tonight because I've still got to do a couple of things on it and I'm teaching now. So go ahead and look for that, and I will wait to see in the questions channel that you can hear me. All right, looks like you can hear me. We're going to go ahead and jump in. And to begin, I'm going to start looking at last week's homework and go through that a little bit, just because that was a difficult one. So let's, whoops. I'm going to make my screen a little bigger. And we'll go into LS Web Homework 5 and open it up in Sublime. All right, so one of the things we talked about, we know how to print to the console, we know how to create some for loops. So let's look at Fizzbuzz and one of the ways that you can solve that. So we worked out a little bit of what that text would be, but basically, let's see, we're counting from 1 to 100. And if it's divisible by 3, we're going to print fizz. 5 is buzz. And 15 is fizzbuzz. So let's start with a for loop for var I equals, let's go ahead and start with 1, actually, just to make things simple. Var I is less than or equal to 100 because we do want to print out 100, not just 99. And then I plus plus, so we'll count from 1 to 100. And then we can do, actually, let's go from 0 so that we can just say, if I modulus 15 equals 0, then we're going to console.log fizzbuzz. Seeing me and not the screen? I should be sharing. Let's see. Yeah, my camera's on. Google Hangout says I'm sharing. Can you see me now? If you can see my code, let me know because I should be sharing my screen now. Okay, cool. So basically we started talking about for I equals 0, I less than or equal to 100, I plus plus, and we're starting with 15. Why are we starting with 15? Well, because if something is divisible by 3 and it's divisible by 5, it's also divisible by 15. Then we can say if I divided by 5 equals 0, console.log buzz, else if I divided by 3 equals 0, whoops, console.log fizz, else console.log I. And one of the things that this will challenge you to understand is the order. So if, our I here is divisible by 15, we're going to count log Fizzbuzz, and then we're going to skip the rest of this if-else if tree. And if not, we'll start at 15, then we'll funnel down to 5, then 3, then 1. This actually works because, if the challenge was print something out that's divisible by 4, it would be a lot more challenging. But since 3 times 5 is 15, it's Fizzbuzz. That would work. You could also switch the order and say I divided by 3, or modulus. You can switch the 3 and the 5. The order here doesn't matter because if it's divisible by 5, it was already caught. If it's divisible by 5 and divisible by 3, we already caught it up here. So that is one of the many, many ways we can solve Fizzbuzz. And I was really excited to see some of the work you guys did there. That's not an easy programming challenge, especially at this stage. And it's really good for everybody to be able to do that. So with that said, today we are going to look a little bit at functions. We haven't done anything as far as functions go, except a couple things. We said before, alert, hello. And when we save that, if we open this up, it is in dev, and then ls web homework 5. We'll open up the index.html. We get an alert that says hello. What is this alert thing? And then why do we have parentheses? We also have seen console.log. What these are called functions. And we'll talk about what a function is, but today we're going to be going over functions in depth. Another one we've used is prompt. Hello. And that looks like this. When we refresh, we have some stuff. We can say cancel or okay. And we also did document.write. That's technically another function. And so you can refresh. There's document.write. Okay. Basically, what a function is a way to save a command. So we wrote some commands like, 5 + 5. We can save this command in a function, and then we can call it anytime we want. So let's create a new function, and we will, for now, say var add 2 5s equals, and then we type the word function. And we close it in a code block. So this is the same as just saying 5 + 5. We've just wrapped it in this really neat code, that we can call again later. So if we call down here, add 2 5s. So let's log it to the console. Actually, let's just document.write, even though that's probably not a good thing to do. So boom, we added 2 5s down here. So really briefly, let's go over the syntax of what we did here. We said var, and we'll learn about this more later, but you don't necessarily have to start with the var. But then we can call our function whatever we want. So let's call this one say hello. And then we say equals function. And then we can say let's say alert hello, and that works. Save, and we call it, and then I always forget to do this, but you do have to call a function, which is just another way to say invoke it, or say, okay, we're storing this code as say hello up here, and now we're going to tell the computer to run it. So we refresh here, this page says hello. Our functions, the JavaScript version of classes, no, they are not. They are quite different. Why are we using console.log instead of document.write? We can use either one. One writes to the console, one will print it out in HTML. Why did we initialize it using var? We'll talk about that later. You can do it with or without, and it works either way. There's a principle called hoisting that will make a difference, but we don't need to understand that just yet. What we need to understand for this is a function is a way to save a block of code, and then we can use it whenever we want. So we could say hello 5 times in a row, and then we don't have to type out alert hello, and it might get mad at me, but it works. So why would we use something like this? Well, it's really to make writing code a lot more simple and a lot more concise. Just if we're going to use the same block of code over and over again, we can store it as a function, and then we can call it whenever we want. And that's something that is really useful. So let's look at an example. Let's say we wanted to create a function. Var function equals add, var function, wow. Var add 2 numbers equals function, and we're going to console, no, it's document.write 8 plus 8. And then we're going to call add 2 numbers. So again, what we're doing here is we're creating a function, add 2 numbers. We're saying that it's a function, and then inside the block, we're telling what the function does. And then we can call the function whenever we want, and it's just going to print that to the screen. What if we wanted to, instead of saying 8 plus 8 down here, what if we wanted to make this variable? What if we wanted to say, we'll say x and y, and then we're going to add x plus y. When we call the function, so basically this is creating one variable, and this is creating another variable, and these can be anything we want, and then we can use those in the body of the function itself. And then when we call the function, let's do 5 and 6. We added up 5 and 6, and those equal 11. So we create them here, we use them here, and then we substitute them here. So let's do another example. Just let's say we have another example. So let's say var multiply 2 numbers is a function. Actually, let's do multiply 3 numbers. Why not? I'm going to take number 1, number 2, number 3. Again, we can name those whatever we want, and we're going to document.write num1 times num2 times num3. And then when we call it multiply 3 numbers, we're going to multiply 15, 293, and 77. And we'll get rid of this one so we don't confuse ourselves. And that is a result of those 3 numbers multiplied. And we can call it a lot of different times with a lot of different numbers. I might break something by making it too big, and there's no break in between those. But you see how that works, right? So what we call these right here, when we're creating the function, we call them parameters. So this is parameter 1, parameter 2, parameter 3. And then when we are injecting them back into the function, we call them arguments. So this is argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the Slack channel and see if there are any questions there. Why? You can call classes. They seem similar. Classes are 2 very different things. You can call both of them, but a function is going to be kind of a single piece of code, and a class will contain functions and objects and variables, and it's kind of at a higher level than function. So a class could contain multiple functions. Let's see. Can this in there be used for word? Oh, can this in theory be used for a word or a statement, yeah, you can really make functions do whatever you want. We could even write multiple things in here, and we could write Fizzbuzz within this function. Let's do that. Well, we're not going to write all of Fizzbuzz, but let's say we're passing a number, and we're just going to call that num within this function, and we're going to say if num is less than or equal to 4, document.write the number is less than or equal to 4, else document.write it's not. And get rid of that. So then and we're going to rename this because we'll call it for check. So let's call for check, and let's pass in 4. See if 4 is less than or equal to 4. The number is less than or equal to 4 because it is 4. And then if we pass in a 5 to for check, turns out it's not. And that makes sense. So why are we using var? Could you write it without var? The answer is yes. It does exactly the same thing, and we're going to talk about that now. So let's pass in a 3 just so we can see the other one load up here. The number is less than or equal to 4. Now let's talk about a principle called JavaScript hoisting. And there's something a little bit not necessarily tricky about JavaScript, but just something that you need to be able to understand. So in JavaScript, when we call a function, or when we create a function, let's imagine down below this line is the stuff we've written. Basically what, I don't know, maybe we have a bunch of JavaScript in here, we have some JavaScript up there. We're not going to write it all out. But when we create a function, when JavaScript runs it, it basically takes these functions and it pulls them out and it adds them to the top. And it does the same thing with variables. So we said var hello equals something. It's going to pull these variables out and add them to the top of the document. So we can actually call a function sometimes. Let's see if we said for check 7. And let's just test this. See what happens here. So we know that code executes from top to bottom. And here we're calling a function. And then down here we're creating a function. Let's see. Doing that right? For check 7. So basically what happens is it's going to pull this, or really any function or variable up, and kind of inject it up at the top. And then we'll run the program according to that being up at the top. So just so you're aware, you might see a little bit of different behavior based on whether or not you use var to create a function. You can create it either way. The general rule is to choose one and stick with it. Personally, I like to write it without, just because it simplifies things. But if there's if you work at a company that's using var when they create all of their functions, you're going to want to stick with that just so things don't switch up and get mixed up on you. All right, Fizzbuzz was called a program. What criteria does a program have to fit in order to be considered one? Anything that runs is technically a program. So if we just said 4 + 5, that is a program. If we said console.log, hello, that's also a program. And 4 + 5, that's valid JavaScript, that's a valid program. It just doesn't produce any side effects. So the computer gets it and it says, okay, okay, 4 + 5, got it, that makes sense, but that doesn't really mean anything. Well, it means something, but it doesn't produce a result. So you could say 3, and that's a program. But of course, program is a general term, and a lot of people consider it something different, but technically, this is a fully functioning program. And with that, let's talk a little bit about scope. So let's say, for example, we have a function. It's called say hello. And inside of it, we are going to do alert hello. So if we refresh right now, nothing will happen. And then once we call say hello, did I do something wrong? Function say hello, alert hello. I did not. Let me debug real quick. Function say hello equals alert hello. Oh wow. Function say hello. All right, this is one of those times when I feel really stupid making really basic mistakes. I do not know what's going on. Oh my gosh, you guys. Wow. Jeez, you have to call the function, guys. Put the parentheses in and call the function. That's what I always say. And I hope that lets you realize that even the best of programmers make really, really fundamental mistakes. Anyway, so we have this function here, and we're saying hello. And let's say we create a variable within this function. It's my name, Austin. And then we're going to create an alert that calls my name. So what happens if we run say hello? Basically, we're going to get an alert that says Austin. Boom, there it is. There's an alert. It says Austin. Now, what if we want to create another alert that says alert name? We'll do the exact same thing. Austin. And there's nothing here. Why isn't it calling Austin again? Well, the reason is because of scope. So when we create a function, yeah, you're right. I should have semicolons, but you don't necessarily need them. Sometimes it's best practice. If I accidentally leave it out, it might still work, but don't follow my example and leave out semicolons. So we created this variable called Austin right here, but that variable belongs to this function. So once we move outside of this function, when we call alert down here with name, it doesn't work anymore. So if that makes sense, we can create variables all we want. Let's say my state equals California. And then we can do document.write my state. And it's not going to write anything because it doesn't have this. So the overall program will have access to everything that's at this level, but if it's written within a function, you can kind of think of it as this is its own little world right in here, in this function. And we can pass things to the outside world. We're going to talk about how to do that in just a second. But it doesn't belong, like this, the stuff that's out here, well, let me take that back. The stuff that's inside of this function isn't necessarily visible to the stuff that's outside of the function. Sometimes we'll call this, or we'll say this is a local variable, so it's local to this say hello function. And if we create a new variable down here, var name equals Austin, and we'll get 2 alerts, and it should print it out, but it's not. This is a global variable. So this is called scope. Yeah, S-C-O-P-E, scope, not stoke. Sorry about that if that's hard to understand. Yeah, and with that, let's go ahead and let's see what else we have. Functions, scope, arguments, statements, and hoisting. Wow, that was quick. We covered everything we have in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and look at the homework real quick. In fact, if I just undo, I've been saving like crazy over the homework, but I think I originally started out with the homework. I picked, oh, here we go. Oh, wow, we went a really long way. So here's one of the many ways that you can use Git. Look at that. Git saved everything for us. So, oh no, we're in homework 5, that's why. cd cd ls web homework 6. Open that up, and we're going to go ahead and look at the homework that we have for today. So the first step in the homework today, as you'll see in the README, is going to be installing something called Node and NPM. And those are basically just programs that will help you run JavaScript files from your command line. And we're going to show you how to do that. And then you're going to download and clone this folder and get into it. So we'll pretend like I just downloaded it. I'm into it right now, which I just did. We'll clear this out. And importantly, we have installed Node. Well, we've run npm install inside of this folder. So follow these directions exactly. Install Node in npm. We're going to clone this folder. You're going to change into it. You're going to, once you've changed into it, run npm install. I'll do that right now. And that is going to install a bunch of stuff that we have built in into this folder itself. And it might take just a minute. And then this homework, the cool thing about this homework is it actually has tests built right in. So you can test to see if you're doing things correctly or incorrectly within the homework itself. And that is taking a really long time. But while that's downloading, we'll go ahead and look at the homework. So here we've pre-written some functions, and they have some parameters that you can use as arguments to solve the homework. So here we have function multiply by 10, and you're going to return, which is just a way to say give this back to the program to be used later, this number. So let's say we write this function as multiply. So let's see, we have multiply by 10, and we have this number. So we can use, well, we have num. So we can just say num times 10. And then if, sometime later in the homework we were to say multiply by 10, 50, what would happen is it would return 50. And so if we said, console.log multiply by 10, 50, it would print out, or it would print out 500. So that's the way we store things within functions, and that's how we call them. So right now we're just writing the function. We're not actually calling it. Now it looks like part of the installation is complete. It should be done pretty quickly. Debating if we should wait or we should move on. But basically, you've been given a parameter. You should use it as an argument. So we'll give you another freebie. Return num after subtracting 5. So we could just return num minus 5. And up here, we should return num times 10. And again, if we were to run this, in fact, let's test it just to show you how that works using Node once this is done installing. Oops. Okay, it looks like it's all installed now. Let's go ahead and call this multiply by 10, and we're going to call it with a 3, and we're going to log that to the console. So console.log multiply by 10, 3. So now when we run this script, so we can run it using Node, we'll just say node exercises.js. It returned a 30, so it printed that out for us. And we actually no longer have to be printing things out. We can just get rid of the web browser, and we can do everything within this little environment because we're really just working with data and code. And then if we wanted to call this function, we could call 5 and 15. Whoa. And it's not going to do anything because we didn't log that to the console. But what if we created a variable here? Var hello equals subtract by 5, 15. And then we could console.log hello. There you go. 15 minus 5 is 10. And you don't need to call things in your homework. What we're actually going to do is we've built in. So we've solved the first two, and after we've installed npm within this folder, we can run npm tests. Missing semicolon. Oh man, did I really do that? Yep. And the linter, or the thing that checks our code, is going to be really strict. So if we make any errors, even if they're little teeny tiny errors, it is going to tell us that. So it looks like I have 23 failed and 2 passed. So this first one that I did has passed. This one that I did failed. And then if I just return 40 and I don't have a semicolon there, it's not even going to run. It's going to say, hey, you have a missing semicolon. And it's really strict. And that is for your benefit because we want you to be writing really clean, really high quality code. So we have 23 failed, 2 passed, and you can even scroll up here and see which ones passed and which ones failed. If it passed, it will have a green check. If it failed, it will have a red X, and you can go back in and figure out why things aren't working. And there are quite a few here. Solve. Don't mess with any of this down here. Don't mess with any of the other folders, or you might break something. Just focus on the stuff in exercises.js after you have followed the instructions directly. Austin is doing the homework for us. Yep, I was doing the homework for you. Why is it called return? That's a really good question. Let's go back to our LS homework 5 so that I have more of a clean slate to work with. So we have, in fact, let's copy over one of these other functions. Let's grab this forecheck that we did earlier. So now we've got forecheck again. We could, instead of saying document.write, and look at that, I forgot semicolons again. Let's just say return it's less than or equal to 4. And then we could say, instead of document.write, we could say return it's greater than 4. And now we can call forecheck. And instead of writing it out to the console, it's just giving us this new thing to work with. So we could say, let's save that as a var. Var less than 4 equals forecheck. And then we can play with it later. Console.log less than 4. And that will print it out down here. So it's basically giving us the result as play with. So now when we call forecheck, let's call it with a 5. We can save it as a variable. We can pass it around. It's really just this free moldable thing that we can do what we want with. So we use a return value instead of logging it to the console, because for most of our programs, logging something to the console isn't going to do much for us. You can log it to the console. That's great. You can see that it's there. But then how do we do something with it? So if we want to use it outside of the context of this function, we can return it, and then we can use it as a variable. We can pass it to other stuff. You know, right here, we're actually passing we could forecheck 15 and pass that directly to console.log. We're really just giving ourselves tools that we can play with, and return is kind of like hitting equals. Yeah, you're exactly right. God CSU. Yeah, so let's see. Have you guys thought about using VMware and VirtualBox to install a virtual machine and use Ubuntu? Yeah, we could, but we don't really need to, so we haven't. For most JavaScript stuff, that's not entirely necessary because JavaScript kind of runs the same from one environment to another. If we're doing something in Python or Java, it would make a lot more sense to give you guys a full box. But as it is, you can just clone the repository and it should work for you once you've installed Node, the same that it'll work for us. And installing Node is quite a bit simpler than installing VMware in a VirtualBox. Really, the browser acts as your box when you're using JavaScript, and that's why we like JavaScript, because everybody has a browser and browsers can all use JavaScript. Yeah, let's go ahead and see if there are any more questions. If not, I think that might be it for tonight. What is hoisting? Hoisting is just saying, it's just an understanding, and we won't use that very much. We'll link you to a blog post that's all about that. But it's basically saying that at runtime, JavaScript is going to pull the functions and some other stuff and basically run it at the top. So you don't need to, well, you may need to worry sometime in the future about how things are written, but it's just generally speaking an understanding that JavaScript is going to pull stuff out at runtime and put that first. Will we be doing everything via Git and the command line from now on? Yeah, so it's a good skill to learn, and that's not just for this class. You'll be using command line and Git for almost every programming thing you do ever, so you should get used to using it. Can you do this with the GitHub desktop app? You could do parts of it. You could clone stuff down, and you could look at it and make sure that it looks nice, and you could push your homework up. But for running npm test and running the tests, you would really need to be using the command line for that. So it's just a really good practice to make sure you're using the command line and using Git from the command line. And if it's not something that you're used to, it's something that you should be familiar with. There's nothing to be afraid of with regard to the command line. It's really pretty friendly. With Git, it's pretty forgiving. You might make a couple mistakes, but it's not a big deal. I just switched platforms. Learning a new terminal is different. Yeah, there's a little bit of learning curve from switching to Windows and Mac and back and forth, but it's really just a couple commands. Like the only thing that's different is seeing which directory you're in, changing directory, and I mean that's pretty much it. Everything else is pretty much the same. And if you're on a Windows and you want to use Bash, there are ways you can do that. But yeah, it's pretty much the same. And I think that's it for today. I can't believe we went over functions, parameters, hoisting, arguments, all in 45 minutes. But another part of your homework is going to be what we call Feynman prompts. So that's named after a famous physicist. And basically, it's trying to describe something as basically as you can to somebody who's never experienced it before, so that you have to make sure that you understand it really well. And you're going to be describing parameters and arguments, and you may not remember exactly what the exact difference is between those, but you can look it up, and then it should cement that. And yeah, that's it for today. What is the standard preferred way to write functions? I write them without var. I think that just makes more sense, and it causes fewer errors, but it totally depends on where you work. There will definitely be people who work at a place that uses var, and if you use var, you should not write them without var, because then you'll get in trouble and make people angry. And yeah, I think that's it for now. We'll go over some data structures in the next one, get into some more advanced JavaScript. But for now, you're writing pretty advanced JavaScript for only being a couple classes in. And hopefully we're developing a really solid understanding of what JavaScript is and how it works. So thanks, guys. We will talk to you next week.